Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live on a Tuesday, November the 12th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, writer and reporter here at Broadway Sports Media. You can follow me on Twitter at JT_Ruhnke. And once again, I am joined. I know you took a little bit of a break on Friday, but good to see you back. Stoney Keeley, the editor-in-chief over at Sobros Network, 1/3 of Football and Other F Words podcast, and co-writer over at Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, I know you got a lot on your plate. Obviously, the Titans are, like you've said many times on the show, probably not the biggest priority right now because of how bad they've been. But how are you doing? I know you just tweeted out live from a house full of boxes and once again in the dungeon here. How are we doing?
Yeah, coming to you guys from the cabin again, and for the last time ever, we're actually packing up this house. This is the house that I grew up in. Almost 40 years my mother has lived here, and that means there's 40 years worth of stuff in this house that we've been out here. I think this is the 5th day straight that I've been out here. I'm soaking wet with sweat. I don't know if it comes through in the camera because I look like I'm in a cave somewhere, but I am soaking wet with sweat. I can feel it dripping down my back. My knees hurt, my back hurts, but we move forward. Somehow I managed to squeeze in a little Chargers Titans tape so that we could talk about this game on the Hot Read today. But you know what? I'm better than I was Friday, that's for sure. And I can't complain, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I get it. Moving sucks. I hate moving. I think it's the worst thing in the world. But I don't know, maybe this is just me, but part of my brain feels like, ooh, like you could go like little treasure hunting throughout the house.
Yeah.
Find a bunch of different things. As Easton joins us in the comments here saying Stoney looks like he's coming to us live from the 1870s. This is a, it's the last time we'll ever see the cave over here, the dungeon over here on the Hot Read podcast. But that is a great reminder to say, if you are joining us live on X or Facebook, do us a favor and head on over to Broadway Sports Media or 440 Sports YouTube channel, where you can join the conversation and say hello to Stoney as he time travels back to the 1870s here. I know for sure when we were helping kind of clean out my grandparents, I found a bunch of like epic vintage like vinyls and stuff that was really cool. I don't know if your mother was a vinyl person or something. I'm sure there were some pleasant surprises though in there.
So the thing that I found was my plaque from Wilson Central High School class of 2004, where I actually won Most Likely to Change the World on senior night. I found the plaque. I thought we lost it because this house flooded in the 2010 flood, and I thought I lost it in that and it got thrown out with the garbage. But no, I opened up some random, there's like a cedar chest in one of these rooms, and I opened it up and it was full of my old comic books, a bunch of like mugs for some reason, and my plaque, Most Likely to Change the World. So.
And that's what we're going to do here today. We are going to change the world by talking about the Chargers and Titans here. Jacob in the comments also joining us and saying, "Somehow I manage," quote by Michael Scott and Stoney Keeley there.
I like that. Nice touch.
That's how we do. That's what we got to do for the rest of the season, right? I mean, we both, I can feel the itch of talking about the NFL draft. I'm starting to gear up my mindset of, because it slowly approaches. Time moves on. Time stops for nobody, and we're getting closer and closer. But I feel like we have to keep managing through this Titans season here, because it is a slog, and somehow we manage. But don't worry, for you, Stoney, who's had a very tumultuous weekend, and everybody else who's trying to get through this Titan season, we've got you covered, because we are brought to you once again by our wonderful sponsors, Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. If you know 440, you definitely know them. If not, and you are joining us for the very first time to talk about this Chargers-Titans game, don't worry, we have you. We are happy to introduce you. Thank you to Sinkers for sponsoring the show. We will talk about them more later. All right, Stoney. This is your first time, I think, doing this fun little exercise, but this is one that, as Easton is in the comments, he'll get a nostalgic flashback here to one of our segments, because I thought we would keep it light and we would do something more like radio-centric-y today. just to keep it light on the heels. And we're going to bring back the Hot Read Heat Index today. We're going to talk about this game here. Basically, this is how it's going to work. Obviously, there are a lot of different things that we saw in this game over the past couple of days after watching the film that we kind of started talking about it outside the show, but there are a couple of things here, with the Titans that seem a little concerning. This is now a couple weeks in a row.
Yeah.
A couple of things from this Titans team that are starting to kind of give us some red flags about how this season has gone. Lewis Cheney in the comments here saying that it's our problem for not seeing the comments. You're probably just in the wrong comment section. There's probably people on Broadway. There's probably people here on 440. I mean, I agree with you there on Sanders, maybe, but we'll get to there eventually. But
whoa! Let's not open that can of worms today.
We're not going to open that can of worms right now.
About QB1. QB1.
But we're going to talk about the Hot Read Heat Index today, and basically this is how it's going to work. We're going to go topic by topic here and rank these things on how concerned we are, starting with the hottest and how the biggest concern for us being scorching, burning being some concern. There is some concern trouble there, but not the biggest addressing need there. Room temperature, which is, it could become a concern, but it really isn't right now. And then cold, which is not a concern. And that's how we're going to go about today's show. If you want to play along with us here, make sure you join the Broadway Sports Media comment section or the 440 Sports Media or Sports comment section, where you can join. And don't worry, we see every and all of your comments, no matter which one you are in here. And we're going to start off with the defense. And I think that's the biggest concern for me over the past couple of weeks. Once again, the Titans continue to be an anomaly on both sides of the ball here. But specifically on the defense, in which that they are still they are still the number one defense in the league by total defense. However, they're 26th in terms of points allowed. Just a staggering number. I believe I heard either yesterday or earlier today that the last time a team was this good at total defense, but this bad in points allowed, I believe it was like 1943 with the Philadelphia Steagles, which apparently was a combination of Philadelphia Eagles and Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know if this is true. I just heard this on the radio, so I'm guessing it's true. But that is the last time. It was when they combined their teams because people were fighting in World War II. It's crazy. I have no idea, but I definitely heard that somewhere. So, it just continues to be a problem here. And I think we have to start off this conversation with a conversation about Denard Wilson's game planning, which I think is something that continues to be a problem here, or at least a concern for us. We talked a lot in the offseason about how we really liked Denard Wilson from a kind of a coaching standpoint, but over the past couple of weeks, it has become kind of concerning that it seems like the most obvious things to take care of and eliminate from an offensive perspective, if you are this defense, they continue to look over. And I know we had some of those red flags in the New England game where Arden Key comes out and he says that he wasn't concerned about the rushing ability. When I talked to Ben Bloom after that week, Ben Bloom said the exact opposite of what Arden Key said to me. He said that, yeah, we know that both those guys could run. And I asked him about Justin Herbert and his rushing ability and said, yeah, that's something we're going to have to pay attention to a lot more this week. And then you look at what they've done here over the past 2 weeks. Drake May, of course, rushing 8 times for 95 yards. That's good for 11.9 yards per carry. And then the Los Angeles rushing attack where Justin Herbert runs for 9 times for not as many yards, but 32 yards. But those 9 rushes were a lot of the times extending these drives for the Chargers, where they are marching down the field from their own territory. Justin Herbert finds a way to move with his, get on the move with his legs and extend these drives for them. And then, a friend of the show, Zach Lyons, over on Cover 2 with Blaine and Zach, he keeps bringing up how it feels like, in hindsight, the Titans probably should have given more attention to a guy like Malik Willis, who they faced in week 3, where he carries for 6 times for 73 yards and has a rushing score. Stoney, I think I want to start there. How concerned are you with, seeing a lot of this attention that we think should go to maybe stopping the run for some of these mobile quarterbacks, and then we continue to see them not do that? How concerned are you from that standpoint on Denard Wilson? And I know it's only one issue on this defense, but how concerned are you that maybe that's leaking into other parts of his game plan overall?
Yeah, I'm pretty concerned. And before I forget, I want to speak to the total yardage thing. If you're getting like 6 or 7 drives a game that last like 8 minutes each, and each one starts at midfield, yeah, it's going to look like you're not giving up a whole lot of yards. So I'm kind of, I don't want to say that's a fraud alert stat or anything like that, but I never really bought into this being the best defense in the NFL. But as for my level of concern with the game planning with the mobile quarterbacks, this feels like this is the third game that I was watching and feeling like they just weren't. I don't want to say they weren't prepared. It was just too easy for a quarterback to tuck the ball and run. We saw it with Malik Willis. They didn't really seem prepared for Malik Willis and what that Packers offense could do. We saw it against Drake May, obviously ripping off chunk yardage. And in this game too, we saw it where if they brought an extra rusher or the pressure came from a certain part of the field, Justin Herbert was very quick to identify the space vacated and attack it. So in other words, if a linebacker comes up, Justin Herbert would find the hole that linebacker left behind and throw to it. And if there wasn't anything there, he had no issue just tucking the ball and running to move the chains. So that sort of efficiency by the quarterback it looks like a defense that isn't really prepared or doesn't have somebody in place to account for that kind of movement. And when I watch this defense, I will call back to what I talked about before the season started. And I wrote about this on Stacking the Inbox. I've talked about it on this show. This defense kind of feels like it's predicated off of interior pressure. So the push up the middle with Jeff and Tavondre Sweat, rushing the quarterback, linebackers filling gaps in the run game, see ball, get ball, blitzing, aggressive, attacking at the point of the handoff, or the point of the drop back, and the cornerbacks holding up in coverage downfield. That sounds nice in theory, but if you can't actually close on the quarterback and there's virtually no threat from the edge, then it blows the whole thing up. And that's where this defense is right now, late in these games when there's no pass rush whatsoever. Justin Herbert has plenty of time in this game to execute the offense, to find the weak spots in the defense. And you're asking your 5th round rookie cornerback, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., and a guy you picked up before the season started, or it might have been during the season, I don't remember, Darrell Baker Jr., who are fine depth pieces. Those are guys that if you have to go to them in a pinch, you feel good about. And Baker specifically has played pretty well given the circumstances, but it's not L'Jarius Sneed. It's not Cheeto Awuzie. It's your backup. So you're asking these guys to hold coverage when you can't rush the passer, and it's just a recipe for disaster. Now there's no real pivoting. I'm not seeing them kind of pivot from this style of defense. So when things stop working, that's when you want to see the adjustment. And I don't feel like we're seeing adjustments. It just kind of feels like we're going to go out there and we're going to run this defense, matchup be damned. Like we're just going to do our thing and it's going to work. And that I think is that I get to that point when I'm watching the tape and I think, okay, this might be a problem. The more offensive coordinators are able to scout this Titans defense and prepare in the film study and that sort of stuff, that could be a problem here. And that's why I'm pretty concerned about it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. However, when you bring that hindsight into it, it feels like maybe I give Denard Wilson a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because at the same time, I know me and Teron Davenport of ESPN were kind of having this discussion in the media room last week. It's like, there's only so much Denard Wilson can do from the sidelines.
It's personnel.
And I think that it comes down to personnel, and we have a lot of thoughts here in the comment section. But I think the first one I want to start with is to your point about kind of Kenneth Murray and some of these guys right now, where Kenneth says the cracks in the linebacking core are starting to show. I'll correct your grammar there, Kenneth. But John Glennon put this out, and I know this was on PFF earlier yesterday, where he said rough return to Los Angeles for the Titans interior linebacker Kenneth Murray. And any way you want to do it, if you want to go listen to Brian Callahan and talk about how, it really wasn't Kenneth Murray's fault on that Quentin Johnston touchdown. He kind of picks him up towards the end of the play, yada, 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 so-and-so. You still just look at what he did yesterday, and it was kind of confirming our priors on who Kenneth Murray really is and what he contributes to a defense. Here's what Kenneth Murray was able to produce yesterday. His 29.9 overall defensive PFF grade was second lowest of the season, and his 29.8 coverage grade was lowest of the season. He allowed 5 catches on 6 targets for 49 yards and a touchdown, and also committed a pass interference call in the red zone. And when I was watching a lot of the film back, this is the conversation I had with Braden Gall over at 440 Sports here with him yesterday. It feels like this game kind of confirmed a lot of our there's a lot of confirmation bias here. Like, this is what we knew all along. And I don't know why we're continuing to act surprised that 10 games into the season, now we see these. Like, this is the things we were talking about way back in May about Kenneth Murray, wondering why he's the big interior linebacker because this is what he gets. And I know when you talk about his ability to cover, when you talked about that, the biggest thing that popped up in my mind, it's like, these are heat-seeking missiles right now whose guidance trackers are just out of haywire. Like, these are heat-seeking missiles who don't know actually how to seek out the target right now. And that comes along with a lot of what they're doing against these rushing quarterbacks, but also in coverage. And I know you bring up the pass rushing ability of this defense right now, and that's where we come full circle to this moment right now where it really does feel like, I think, it really comes down to a personnel issue. Like, I think Denard Wilson, I've come a little bit back around on the Denard Wilson train here, in terms of, like, there's only so much he can do.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, because I do watch this team and I'm like, God, they need bodies at the edge. They need a linebacker that can actually, like, drop into space and cover when he ends up in one-on-one situations. And I do kind of want to hold out to see, like, what does this thing look like with the full build in place? Like, get the players you want, and then let's run the system and see what it looks like. But I think my critique is, like, the unpreparedness for the running quarterbacks. And then I would give you another example. Like, I'm watching Chargers tape, preparing for last week's matchup, and I'm noticing, hey, movement among the interior defensive line seems to work. Like, the Chargers are really good at tackle between Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, but the interior of the line, while they're good displacing guys up the middle and clearing gaps for the run, they're kind of susceptible to lateral movement. And so I'm thinking, okay, maybe that's a way that we can throw a wrinkle in here and maybe add a little lateral movement to generate some pass rush. And it just didn't happen. It was just like the same defense over and over. And I think that's where I'm like, is there something more creative he can do than just, it feels a lot like we're just banging our head against the wall, trying to tear it down at this point. And I think that's where the question starts to arise, like, okay, what's the game planning situation going on here?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. There's a lot of questions, and it feels like we can't really know unless we see the full build, maybe in another acquisition cycle. But also, as Zedine points out here, considering both big free agent corners have been out, the defense hasn't been terrible. But what would this defense look like if you had your top 2 corners? And I know that, Brian Callahan yesterday still had praise for Jarvis Brownlee Jr., but in that press conference, listening to Brian Callahan, this is where I got to. And I tweeted this out yesterday where I said Brian Callahan's comments on Jarvis Brownlee Jr. and Kenneth Murray really just tell the difficult truth of this season. A defense who is simply outmatched as a result of injuries and being put in tough positions. An excellent answer on the Quentin Johnson touchdown, but this team cannot keep up without their top two corners in Awuzie and Snead. I really do believe that, because as much as we like what Jarvis Brownlee Jr. has done and some of these other guys they've picked up off practice squads and whatnot, especially with Brownlee Jr., he's been serviceable in relief, but still, he's a fifth-round rookie. The overwhelming amount of penalties and rough reps are expected, and without, having your top two guys like Snead and Awuzie, I feel like it's hard to get a good grasp of how good truly this defense can be. And Zedin comes back. I think I totally agree here. It's like the whole scheme of the defense is to have good corners to delay wide receivers getting space so the defensive linemen can get to the quarterback. When you aren't having those aggressive shutdown corners like a Snead and, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. at sometimes is able to do that, but still it's like, how much how long can he really do that as he continues to learn the game? I mean, Denard Wilson even said last week, it's like he's still learning the game because there are just some things he hasn't seen yet. Like he's learning trial by fire, and he's swimming, and surviving to an extent, but it's like he's not going to be the same caliber of a guy like Snead. It's tough to really get a good idea on this defense right now. And as Jacob says here in the comments, he also says L'Jarius Snead and Christian Fulton played equally well on Sunday. So
touché.
I mean,
Touché,
that is very good. That's great for the Chargers, man. They got the same exact output from both of those guys. And so with all those things coming back to all those things here, I think when we look at this, when you look at the hot read heat index here, between scorching, where it's a big time concern, trouble, burning, there is some concern, trouble, room temp, or cold, I think I land at the second to top one, burning for me. It's like there is some concern, but I'm not going to ring the bell and say, everybody get out of the building because we have a full on fire, because we don't have all the pieces here right now.
Yeah, I would say burning as well. And I think the change, my perception of the defense, the change is rooted in getting to a point where I got to with the offense earlier in the season where I just said, you know what, they just need a right tackle and they probably need a quarterback. And that's where I'm at on the defense now, where I'm just like, man, I don't think this can function until they get more pass rushers and they get their cornerbacks back. And that's not something that you can solve for until you get to another player acquisition cycle. So I'm burning too. That's what she said.
I think I agree with you there. Before we move off of the defense here, Jacob in the comments here, and reminder, if you're joining us live on Twitter or Facebook and want to ask some questions about what we think about the Titans right now and have your input into the Hot Read Heat Index, you can join the Broadway Sports Media YouTube channel or the 440 Sports YouTube channel chat to join in on the conversation. Jacob asks, what is the hot read index for L'Jarius Snead deleting a facepalm emoji tweet? I'm going to put it at room temp because I describe room temp as could be a concern because frankly, I don't know exactly what that means. Is it more of a frustration thing for him being like, I want to get out there, or I don't know what the context is here of that tweet.
Yeah, I'm going to go room temp as well. And I wanted to right off the top of the bat, just first thing on my head was cold, but you addressed it. We don't technically know what that was about. So I'm a big believer in multiple scenarios could play out. So I'm going to acknowledge the possibility that one of those scenarios could have been frustration, and it could have been related to the team. So maybe.
Yeah, I agree there. We'll see if we learn more. If we get back on the ground here in the next couple of days and do some sleuthing, maybe we can find out there. All right, before we move on, have to give a big shout out to our sponsors here, Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. Sinkers Beverages, of course, has been serving the East Nashville community for over 40 years. They are a 4-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year, including this year, 2024. And hey, was alerted to this yesterday, but you got to join their in crowd because it's getting towards the holiday season here where you're with family and hanging out with family, and it's a great time. And they are starting to do their special in-crowd allocations where if you are one of their premier customers, they will, you can request, specific bourbons and hard to find items from them. And they take care of you because, local businesses helping out local customers here. And that's what's so great about Sinkers Beverages. Have to join their in-crowd because they not only do they do that, but they give you special benefits, bi-weekly tastings, all the great stuff in their absolutely amazing selection of wine. And it's also got to follow them on Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter at SinkersBev, and then on Instagram at sinkers.nashville. And if you can't get out to Sinkers, no worries, because they have you covered. You can have the booze delivered to you. Simply search Sinkers on Uber Eats, and they drive so you can drink responsibly. Have to give a special shout out to Bluegrass Beverages as well, their sister store out in Hendersonville, who have been serving that location for over 50 years. Thank you to Sinkers and Bluegrass Beverages. All right, Stoney, let's move on to the O-line because I do think that this one is a little bit more of a interesting conversation here. And I think we might maybe have some disagreement. Not sure. But before we talk about the O-line, I do want to talk about this real quick where Easton says, Mr. President, Cole Spencer just went down. And that is on the heels of email we just got where the Titans have made a transaction here in the middle of this show. Let me go find it just to confirm, make sure all the details are correct here. But the Titans have added offensive lineman Chandler Brewer to the practice squad, and he replaces guard Cole Spencer. He has been waived from the practice squad. And while you were giving a little bit of your take about the defense, I went and I looked at Chandler Brewer's PFF site and tried to find anything and everything I could find. And I keep going back. Let me see. Can I go back to like 2021? Like, I don't know when the last time this guy played. I saw that Paul Kaharski tweeted. He said Brewer has played 14 games with the Rams and Jaguars, and he played at MTSU. But like, I'm going back through here, and I simply, I don't know. I can't find a lot on this guy. It seems like he is a practice squad mainstay for a lot of teams here.
I'll say this, JT. I'll say this. When the world needs help, they go to the Harvard of the South, Middle Tennessee State University.
This is true. And Jacob here in the comments here saying no relation to Aaron Brewer. But yeah, I mean, this is just going to tell the tale of, as much as some of the offensive line has looked really, really good over the past couple of weeks, we cannot ignore the fact that this right side of the line continues to be an absolute dumpster fire for this team. I do think that when you look at what Ojukwu and Watson, specifically, like Leroy Watson flat out costed the Titans points here on Sunday. But like, he gets them out of a field goal range or comfortable field goal range for Nick Folk and costs the team points there. However, John Ojukwu comes in for the next drive as they continue to do this flip-flopping and doesn't offer that much help either. And so when they go back to Leroy Watson after that, I mean, at least he didn't have another penalty for the rest of the game. But like, it really is tough because I really don't think we're at a point where either one of these guys is good enough to take on more reps than the other one.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like this, JT. I mean, it is so funny to me to just watch this competition play out in real time during actual meaningful NFL games. I jotted it down. 2 of Leroy Watson's penalties forced a 3rd and 21 and a 3rd and 26. That is not good. Those are poorly timed penalties. I'm kind of curious as to whether or not these issues are things that the coaching staff can pick up on in practice. And the example I used was, it's like, hey, we can't put Leroy Watson out there in an actual game because he's grabbing Arden Key by the face mask every rep in practice. Like, if that's the problem, then I get it. I'm on the same wavelength as you guys, because this is pretty egregious, and it just feels like every week we are talking about not just one, sometimes not even just two, but multiple costly penalties from Leroy Watson. And I don't know, like, how at this point you can't weed this stuff out, because I know the question to begin with was, well, the rhythm, how can he get into a rhythm if they're swapping right tackles? But like, you've played several games now and it's still the same stuff over and over. So it's just, the right tackle spot to me is troubling. And I think that where we will probably disagree on this one is just the overall state of the offensive line. If you just go left to right, Latham, Skoronski, Cushenberry, Radens, I was starting to feel pretty good about that unit getting somewhere. But now you factor in the right tackle, and it's the same as we talked about the defense. Like, it's a problem that they're going to keep trying and they're going to keep rotating warm bodies in, but I don't think they're going to be able to really solve, or at the very least upgrade, until next spring.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like, I'm with you there. Like, I'm going to take it all the way to a 10 here on the heat index. I'm going to go scorching, because as good as Latham and Skoronski and even Daniel Brunskill in this game, and Radens has looked at time, like, as good as they are, like, you cannot really get that great of an evaluation from a full team standpoint when you have, as like, I'm agreeing with Lewis here in the comments, a clown show stuff. Like, when you're having these mixing of right tackles 10 weeks into the season, like, that is a major problem. And so just looking at the O-line pass blocking grades per PFF over this game, JC Latham continues to be great. Like, he continues to be stellar and an awesome pick this past draft cycle here, with an 87.2 PFF grade in this game. One pressure. Peter Skoronski coming along and having a pretty strong, I would say, last 2 or 3 games here. He has a 70.8 PFF grade, allows one pressure. Daniel Brunskill in relief here, as we said, when he comes on as that glorified tight end, we were saying he's the best. He's the second best offensive lineman out there, and he played well in this game. 69.8 PFF grade, one pressure. Dylan Radens, 58.2, had 2 pressures including a sack, but that's still overshadowed by the Ojukwu Watson hive mind that allowed 4 pressures including 1 sack, and then there were 2 sacks attributed to Levis, 1 each to Spears and Vanette. We can talk about Will Levis in just a second, but like, when you look at what Latham, Skoronski, and Brunskill were able to produce here, which was 3 pressures in total, and then you look at the one position, the rotating head hive mind of Ojukwu and Watson giving up 4 pressures and a sack, like, that's a major problem. And like, to take this idea of a clown show one step further, and Jacob here in the comments says, like, we need the Isaiah Prince that was promised. Like, I get that he's jesting there, and Zedine also says, got to give him some credit for trying. Like, Bill Callahan last week flat out said, I don't know if he was trying to make it sound like it was funny, but he literally, the words that echoed out of, or that came out of his mouth, were that when we get Isaiah up to getting him in the mix here, we may go to a 3 offensive lineman cycle here, which is just crazy to me.
Get the kid from MTSU, make it 4.
Yeah, I mean, hey, get Chandler Brewer in there, make it 5. Hey, is Scott Fuchs still working with MPF? Can we get MPF back in there and just make it everybody gets a drive? I mean,
everybody gets a play.
Everybody gets a play. Could you imagine, like, 6 plays into a drive and like every single right tackle option that, like, they are bringing in 6 right tackles on the active roster on game days? That would be wild to me. But I mean, yeah, like, there's only so much you can do right now. And I know I've threw this out there. I was like, hey, I know he hasn't looked the best in his 2 starts he has as the Giants right tackle right now. But like, it still is crazy to me that, like, you saw this problem coming from a mile away, and you saw a guy like Chris Hubbard's, you saw a guy like Chris Hubbard's on a practice squad. And I wonder why you haven't even why you didn't even really pick up the phone there for a guy.
Yeah.
And I like a guy that and I know it's a new offensive line staff, but like this is a guy who like last year was, when he was healthy, was like your best offensive lineman at times last year. And so for me, it still is just as hot as it can get, even though we've seen some good things from JC Latham and Peter Skoronski. It's just, it comes down to like, there is no fixing it this year. And you just kind of have to continue to try to evaluate Will Levis with the thought that he's going to get basically twice as many pressures and maybe, QB hits from the right side of his line that he is from the rest of the offensive line together. And I think that's a massive problem to me.
It truly is like sawing off your right foot and then trying to run a marathon with this offensive line.
Yeah, no,
And I think
I agree.
the exponential impact of that is that it bleeds into everybody else. I mean, you think about the timing of the quick passing game, the short passing game, how critical that is for this offense to really move the chains and play efficient offense. You think about it from the quarterback's perspective and how his brain is kind of hardwired and how he has to know on every play there's an extra layer to his processing process that he's got to know. I could get blindsided and folded in half because of the right tackle at any moment. It's man, it's tough. And I, as bad as it's been, I still watched this game and thought Watson and Njoku are probably their best bet at this point. So I would imagine the rotation's probably going to continue until maybe Isaiah Prince can earn a crack at it. But
yeah, Mr. 2.9 PFF grade in the Super Bowl. Let's see if he can change the Titans' problems and fix that problem there. Because hey, the Bengals almost won that Super Bowl, even with a guy getting a 2.9 PFF grade. So who knows? Maybe Brian Callahan knows something that
that's
we
the case.
Don't.
That's the case you point to when you say, "Hey, they did it. Maybe we can do it too."
Maybe we can do it as well.
All right, pieces to that Bengals team than just the shitty right tackle. But
yeah, I do like. I mean, as Z-Dean says, it's like pooping your pants then changing your shirt. Like, well, maybe we'll try a different top here and figure that out. But Z-Dean also saying at this point, just go Levin, Brunskill, Radens. Like, we've seen Radens play right tackle, and we know we can't. Like, Radens is finally looking like a guy that maybe they could have him long term as the right tackle, which I mean that's a conversation. That's a conversation for after the season. But like he's played well enough to where like if you find an option or like a stalwart guy next year at right tackle, and you go Latham, Skoronski, Cushenberry, Radens, and then your right tackle option that can be that guy that you feel strongly about. Like if the play that Radens is having right now at right guard is your worst like issue on the line next year, like I don't think that's a great, I don't think that's a terrible problem to have right now. And so I do like what Radens is doing. And I as much as I would like to see, Brunskill or Radens out there at right tackle, I think the unfortunate truth is I don't think it's going to change that much here. And that's Paul Karski here in the comments saying Radens is finally okay at guard. Moving him to tackle probably won't fix things, especially because, I mean, Corey Levin comes into that game and Brian Callahan gave him his flowers for stepping up in a big way. But like Corey Levin also was, he is a guy who was the backup center in that game. He fully well knew that he could come into that Patriots game and still was almost trying to catapult Trebuchet that ball over Mason Rudolph's head. So
I thought Brunskill did a pretty fine job at center in this Chargers game. Too. And I do think I go back to, I can't remember if it was Bill or Brian, but someone was asked about Radens moving to tackle, and they said it would be a disservice to Dylan to move him because he is starting to play well. And I'm okay with opening the door for that conversation, JT. Like we can go ahead and talk about potentially extending Dylan Radens. I think this scheme kind of streamlined some things for him. I think they put his athleticism and power, the combination of the physical traits, to good use with Dylan Radens, pulling, getting to the edge, pulling and pounding, baby. Pulling and pounding.
Pushing and pulling.
That's that just feels like it is, the scheme is suited for Radens' strength. It was just a matter of time, him kind of catching up to speed and getting the reps, and now we're seeing him excel in it, you kind of make your offensive line worse at least two positions if you do that. And I don't know that it can get any worse at right tackle. So Raiden's probably is an upgrade there, but then you're worse at center and right guard. So, and you factor in that this is probably a lost season anyway. I know the coaches aren't going out there on Sunday morning saying, well, it doesn't matter if we win or lose this game. Who really cares? I know they're coaching to win, but I think at the same time, it's like, what are we really doing here this season? Let's let the guy get as many reps as he possibly can at right guard, because you might be trying to evaluate him too. When you're looking at total pieces across this team, it's not just about Will Levis. It's not just about these receivers, Calvin Ridley. It's about everybody. And Raiden's is one of those guys.
Yeah, no, I agree. Maybe Ed here, maybe he found the missing piece where he says Watson lost his freak. Maybe he lost his powers.
Maybe it's too much freak. Maybe it's too much freak
going on. Maybe we've jumped the shark here.
Grabbing and holding and false starting, that's
he's a little too eager. Yeah. Maybe that is maybe our last 15 minutes of offensive line talk. You can just throw it out the window because we just got to get his freakiness level back down. All right, let's talk about, finally, to end off the show here, Will Levis. I'm surprised. Like, I wanted to go into the show. I totally forgot to say it at the beginning. Like, this is the first time I think all season we've probably started the show without talking about the quarterback position first and foremost. Like, the defense was a bigger issue in this game than I think Will Levis was. And I think we can have a conversation about the offense, but Will Levis in this game, I think let's just give our grades out on Will Levis for this game. And I'm going to go with room 10 because after the game, I thought, when I went back and kind of watched the tape as well, I thought Will Levis was fine. Like, I thought he was okay. Like, this is probably quietly game he's played all season, in my opinion. And I don't know if you were on the same boat, but like, I think in this game, like, if that's the kind of play you're going to get from Will Levis the rest of the season, I would probably feel pretty room temp, like, all right about it. Like, I know we're probably going into the draft cycle with looking for a new quarterback, but like, if he plays, like, this is a guy who I think can at least keep you in a couple more of these games down the stretch here.
Yeah, I thought it was incremental improvement. I thought he was a little more careful with the ball. I thought his deep shots that he did take were pretty well timed. I don't think the first touchdown throw to Calvin Ridley was necessarily good. Ridley did kind of have to slow down, as a little bit behind him. But I think the decision, from a pure decision-making standpoint, that was the moment to take the shot. He did it. He had the guy, and it resulted in a touchdown. So I thought the stuff like that, the operation of the offense was a little bit cleaner than usual. He avoided the catastrophic mistake. He was sliding instead of, getting blown up like Brian Urlacher coming over the middle or something like that, avoiding those hits. I thought he was improved in that. My concern still is that, man, we're deep into the season at this point, and we're just now talking about incremental improvement, safest game of the year, maybe his best game of the year. If this was like week 3, I would say, hey, maybe he's going to turn this thing on and he's going to go on a run here. But the fact that it is November 12th and we're just now like, well, he didn't cost the team a game and that kind of stuff. I just wonder, what the hourglass really looks like on Will Levis, because there's a part of me that thinks, okay, from where he was in that Chicago game to where he is now, is he going to get the time it would take at that rate to get to where he's serviceable, consistent, and reliable? And I still don't know if that's the case. So if we're giving him the benefit of the doubt, if we're going to be patient and say, you know what, Will Levis is going to have 2025 to make his case as well, then I would say, yeah, we're making some progress here. If the evaluation truly is 2024 and 2024 only, I don't know that he has the games left to really put together an adequate sample size to say with definition, this is my job, I'm the guy moving forward. So in the context of all of that I just word vomited into my microphone, I'm landing on room temp because it's still for me kind of I don't know. I think we know what he is at this point, and maybe you can win some games with him, but I don't think it's anything special here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just all for adequate quarterback play at this point. Like, no,
Yeah, fair enough.
breaking interceptions that show us that either Brian Callahan can't really be play calling and head coaching, or like seeing this offense kind of operate. Like, you need some of these games where he is just being safe to see proof of concept sometimes. And I think there were a couple times in this game you saw proof of concept earlier today. Just kind of going back through some of my favorite plays. There were a lot of nice plays where Will Levis and Brian Callahan with this offense were doing some absolute trickery on a lot of screen plays where, you said, when you saw some of those big meaty men getting downfield and executing and getting in front of Tony Pollard to get convert first downs and things like that. Like, those are some nice plays, but then you also see some nice throws from Will Levis, the ones where he's fitting it into very tight windows. When I went back and I was like, I know he fit some in there to NWI in this game, but when I go back and you look at really how tight that window was, like, those were encouraging throws to see from a guy who, was putting them accurately and on target. I feel like a lot of those, maybe last year or earlier in the season, those would be the type of throws where you'd be like, oh my God, those should have been picked off, but he gets a break. But those were big time throws that I thought he executed well. I think that, even though Kenneth says that we shouldn't count the garbage time touchdowns, I thought that throw at the end of the game to Calvin Ridley was a really nice ball by Will Levis. And if you see that ball some other time in the game, perhaps on a when you're driving into the red zone and instead of throwing a fade to Josh Wiley, you try to do a similar type thing for Calvin Ridley towards the end zone, like maybe you see a different outcome and a result there. And so, well, I think there is some things to be said about that.
Yeah, and I think to Kenneth's point, like we're talking about, we're not projecting wins and losses and production and that sort of thing, but just evaluating tape, just watching the tape, watching the technique, watching the decision making, the ball placement, that sort of thing. I think you can see glimmers of hope in those plays, and it might not mean anything on the outcome of the game that we're breaking down today, but it's just a matter of kind of assessing against a quality opponent, a good defense, assessing the decision making and the technique and that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And just kind of furthering the point of how, how serviceable he was this week, being Levis. There were 4 quarterbacks this week that posted a CPOE of 10% or higher. That included Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, also in this game, and Will Levis in this game. That was a pretty telling that Will Levis kind of operated the offense in a way that kind of showed us that he's capable of it when he wants to be. But at the same time, like maybe one of these weeks we'll get complimentary football where, the defense is finally clicking and is able to play like that number 1 total defense that we see on the stat sheet. Maybe the NFL officiating in, New York gets their heads out of their butts and, doesn't make a pretty bad call like they did in this game. And you see that, Will Levis is able to operate this offense. You get some complimentary football from the defense, and you see proof of concept that this can be a team that is in games and is competing. But like, there's so many moving parts there that we've already talked about that have to click at the same time. And we continue to not be able to see that. ZD also saying this week is going to be his biggest test. The Vikings could put Levis in the blender. I think it's no question that he's going to be in that blender. It's going to be a matter of, can he get out of it? Like that's the biggest thing. I think there's no question that he's going to struggle this week. It's how he kind of bounces back. Would you say that that's the case for him this week?
I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be fun to watch as long as you have no expectations for this team whatsoever. It's like, this is going to be a test, man. Like, this is going to be an opportunity. I think if you want to look at it the optimistic way, you say this is an opportunity to really get that trial by fire and come out cleaner on the other side. I think it could get kind of ugly. I mean, I really do. This is not a defense that you want to hold on to the ball too long with. It's not a defense that you want to drift in the pocket, lose track of where the pressure's coming from. It's going to be coming from everywhere. It's going to be fast and furious. This is a really fun defense to watch if you like watching football, if you're just interested in it, scheme, stuff like that. I would recommend catching some of the Minnesota Vikings, but I think it's going to be a completely different experience than what he got against this Chargers defense last week. And I don't think it's unreasonable at all to say that they're going to put him in a blender.
Yeah, I agree. And you bring up a great point that I think we also didn't really touch on. The drifting in the pocket is still such an issue. I mean, looking at some of the look at some of the clips where they have trips out right, and they have Chigakonkwo on the left there, or no, I think it was trips out right. They had either Nick Vannett or Josh Wiley as the tight end on the left side there. You know, Will Levis hikes the ball. He moves up. He has Chig just sitting in a soft zone coverage there. And he takes the sack because he drifts basically right into the line of scrimmage and they take him down. I was pulling my hair. I was like, just throw the ball. Even if you're not going to get the yards there, get the ball out.
And man, the issues when he was stepping up into the pocket, but still holding on to the ball. It's like, man, you are going the direction where all the other players are. You're not running away from them. You're running to them, and you've got to get that ball out, man. If you're going to make that decision, you don't have any time to get up 3 steps in the pocket and then reassess where everybody's at. You got to know where you're going. You got to step up, make the decision, and you got to fire that pigskin, baby.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so maybe that's what makes me a little bit concerned about Will Levis this year, continuing to see those issues that we've known about for quite a while now.
I think this is a case where multiple things can be true. I think this can probably be his safest game that he's played so far this season. And I think we can also say that we probably still know what he is. I don't think this game really changed my perception very much of what he can be. I kind of feel like we still know what he is, and this is probably him at his best, maybe.
Yeah, I agree there. And I know we're running short on time here, of course, but
my bad.
I think that no, you're totally fine. I think it's all right. I think we'll end off the show then, because maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this on Friday's show about maybe the offensive play calling and things like that, because I have some thoughts there. But I think that Ed Henry says here, are we destined to have another offseason without having an answer on Levis, perhaps rationalizing that if right side of line is fixed, he could be the guy? I think the ultimate answer still for me is probably not. I think.
Well, oh, man. Ed's got us talking. Ed's going to buy us another 5 minutes. We're going to run over.
Okay. Oh, boy.
I think there's an idea to entertain here, and I think it's a really interesting discussion to be had, and we can maybe save it for a later date. But is it easier? How much of a leash? Okay, I'll put it this way. How much of a leash will Brian Callahan and this coaching staff have if patience is already wearing thin with the results this year? Will they feel like they have the grace to go get a new quarterback and essentially start over? Or will it be a case where they may feel like, man, it might be easier to work with Will than to start over with someone new? At least we know what Will is. We might only have 2 or 3 years to get this thing right before we're canned anyway. Should we stick with what's familiar or start over with someone new? I think there could be an interesting discussion to be had there. I will say I'm playing devil's advocate here because I don't think Will Levis is the guy. I think they're going to draft Shedeur Sanders if they can get their hands on him. Or I hope they draft Shedeur Sanders. I hope they're not drafting any of these other quarterbacks and trying to think they're going to turn the franchise around.
It comes down to Brian Callahan, right? Because when everything's said and done, Brian Callahan came after the Titans drafted Will Levis. So there should be no reason that Brian Callahan is tied to Will Levis, I would say, even though, he did kind of say in the offseason, like part of the allure of this job was seeing what Will Levis had and liking some of the things that he can do there. And so even though I still don't think that Brian Callahan should or is tied to Will Levis. And so that it comes down to, does Brian Callahan want his guy, right? He is the head coach. Like, does he want his guy, being this guy who's been around a lot of quarterbacks? I think that would be the question to ask there. Like, if Brian Callahan wants his guy and his guy is in this draft, okay, then the GM and head coach are tied to the next quarterback. But if Brian Callahan's guy is not in this upcoming draft, I think that is a question that you have to ask there. Like, you've made this progress so far with Will Levis, your guy. There's no reason for us to reach in this draft for a guy, because we've seen how that really works out over the past couple of years in drafts like this. Maybe we try to ride it out with Will Levis, and then that's where you get the question, like, how safe is a guy's job like Rand Carthon? Or if Brian Callahan doesn't go out and get his quarterback here, and we start to believe maybe he is tied to Will Levis, like, when does the clock start ticking there? And I think that's where you'd have to go with that conversation for sure.
Yeah, that's you just said what I was trying to say better than I did.
Okay, but well, hey, here we'll end off here with a couple quick hits. Being that, Ken is asking for a weekly update on Stoney's college quarterback rankings. Is there anybody else in this going forward here that you would like outside of Shedeur?
Shedeur is QB1, and then there's like everybody else. The rest of the class is like, if you need a guy that might be good in like 3 or 4 years, you roll the dice on one of these guys. But I think right now my number 2 would probably be, I can't remember my rankings off the top of my head. I think number 2 for me is Jalen Milroe at this point.
Jalen Milroe. Wow. Okay.
Still,
well,
yeah.
I'm still so far out on that. Like, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I am too. Like, I don't want the Titans to build around Jalen Milroe or anything like that. But I think I think that's just how I have them stacked now. Carson Beck, with every game that passes, is moving closer and closer to undrafted status. I wasn't too impressed with Nussmeier, but I haven't watched a lot of tape on these guys. I'm at 1 to 2 games each right now. I've watched 4 games of Shedeur, though, because I love watching him play, and I think he's the one guy in this class that can be a serviceable starter in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but that'll be so interesting when we get there. But I think that's going to wrap up our conversation today on where we think the Titans stand right now. So certainly there was I think, outside of Will Levis, I think we had some concern for this team right now, which is crazy to say,
sure.
But based on their performance in this Los Angeles Chargers game, it's like Will Levis wasn't the problem there. And I think that's where we're going to have to be, especially when they go up against a lot of tough opponents the next couple of weeks, with Minnesota this week that we just talked about being a test, Houston, Washington, with Jaden Daniels playing on fire right now. Well, I guess he kind of went back down to earth the past couple of weeks, but you never know, especially quarterbacks that can run. Big problem for the Titans. And we're going to be able to talk about that and so much more coming up on Friday. Thank you once again to Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages for sponsoring the show. And until Friday, where we are going to talk about Will Levis being in this Minnesota blender, this has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you on Friday.